Hi everyone. It's 7 o'clock, I believe, and I'm Aleta Coroneo, and this is Buddhism for Beginners. This is a new 6-week course of Buddhism for Beginners, and it's based on a course which was named Buddhism in a Nutshell, which was written by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, the spiritual director of Vajrayana Institute. Hi, Crystal. And Vince is still at work. I'm glad that he's at work. He's very fortunate to have, like I am at the moment. We have to be fortunate for what we have. So we will start with our usual arrival meditation, just to help us to settle the mind and body a bit, if it will, in this moment, to help us to let go of what may have been a busy, racy mind from a busy, racy, stressful day. We just give the body and the mind an opportunity to settle and to arrive in the present moment, wherever we are now. So just getting into a comfortable position, as comfortable as you can be. And let the chair or the floor or the cushion take the full weight of your body. Take a couple of deep breaths all the way into the belly if you can. And having a sense of letting go of any stress you're holding on to with the out breath. And then just letting the breath flow into its natural rhythm. And feeling the points of contact of our body with that secure, solid surface holding it. And just noticing how the body is in this moment. Without judgment, just noticing how it is. Noticing if there's any areas of tension, tightness, or discomfort, pain in the body. Just being aware. And just seeing if we can release some of that tension or discomfort or pain with the out breath. We can mentally say the word release on the out breath. And just imagine that we're letting go of that tightness or discomfort. And if we can't let go of all of it, maybe we can let go of some of the tightness or discomfort. Just saying the word release. Maybe we can just imagine what it would feel like to be able to release. Now just gently placing our attention on the breath. Wherever we notice the breath the most in this present moment. It may be at the nostrils or on the upper lip. Maybe the rise and fall of the chest or the rise and fall of the belly. Or it may be the complete wave-like flow of the breath. Wherever you notice the breath the most in this moment, gently placing our attention there. And just observing each in, each out breath. You might notice that natural relaxation that occurs with each out breath. The muscles of the chest and the diaphragm relax, allowing the breath to flow out. We can use each out breath to relax deeper into the meditation, to release any remaining tension or discomfort. We can release any thoughts that arise, any sensations, any distractions. We can just release with each out breath. When our attention wanders away, that's okay. We just gently, kindly bring our attention back to the breath again and again. Just this moment, just this breath. Not trying to control the breath in any way, just allowing it to be. And just for a moment, thinking about our motivation for being here tonight, to listen to some of the Buddha's teachings. Seeing if we can develop a positive motivation for our efforts tonight. And then we see if we can expand this motivation out so that we may benefit not just ourselves, but those around us as well. And we could spread that out to every being, having the wish that we may be able to help every being to be more calm, more wise, more compassionate. And now just noticing how the body is in this moment. No judgment, just noticing. Notice how the mind is in this moment. There's no right or wrong, it's just your experience. Becoming aware of the points of contact of our body with that secure, solid surface holding it. Noticing the touch of our clothes on our skin and the air on our skin. Noticing the noises inside the room. The noises outside the room. And when you're ready, feeling joyful and relaxed, gently open your eyes and have a stretch. So how has your week been, Crystal? And if anyone else is watching, it would be lovely if you could introduce yourself, just put your name in the comment bar. And you could also put in the comment bar if there's anything in particular that you would like to learn about Buddhism at an introductory level, because I'm an introductory teacher. Or if you have any questions at any time, you're also free to put them in the comment bar, and I will do my best to answer them or to find an answer for you during the week and get back to you in the next class next week. It's been a great week, said Crystal. That's excellent. How about mine? My week's been up and down, but I'm learning sometimes to, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, love my problems like ice cream. And that's never actually happened to me before. I always thought that was a bit out of my reach to love my problems like ice cream. But a couple of times this week, I was actually thinking that I am really enjoying the challenge of problems arising, because then I can work with my mind and I can put some of the Buddha's teachings into practice and see how my practice is going. And I think Crystal has that same sort of attitude when problems arise for her. The Buddha's teachings are really helpful for dealing with life's difficulties and dealing with all the problems that arise. They're very, very useful. So, just a very brief introduction to myself, to my background, and to the Vajrayana Institute, or VI as it's known. A crazy week, but extremely grateful, says Crystal. I think that's a very important part of learning to work well with the challenges in life, to remembering what we have to be grateful for. So my interest in Buddhism started in about 1995 when someone gave me a book to read called The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, which was a bestseller at that time, written by Sogyal Rinpoche. And it had quite a profound effect on me as I was reading this book, which was the first book I'd ever read about Buddhism. It seemed to be very logical and it all made such sense to me. It was just the Buddha's psychological tools just seemed to be so practical and so applicable in my own life for the problems and challenges that I had at that time. So it really resonated with me. And even though it had a really big effect on my life, I didn't actually do much about it until about 8 years later. No, it was more, maybe 10 years later. I had young children at the time, 3 young kids at home, and I just didn't have the conditions to be able to put much spare time into learning more, exploring Buddhism more. But eventually I got there and I started meditating regularly in about 2007. I was very fortunate to connect with a Buddhist nun in the Sutherland Shire where I live, Venerable Yangchen. I started going to, well, I actually took my kids to Venerable Yangchen's meditation classes because I thought they needed to learn to meditate because they were so challenging to me, causing a lot of my problems, I thought. They were always arguing and fighting, and I thought they needed to be fixed with meditation. I think meditation did help them, but eventually I realised that I needed to meditate and work on my own mind and fix my own problems in my mind. And that's what Buddhism has done for me ever since. I'm definitely not perfect. I'm not a Buddha. I'm a work in progress. I still have many problems, many weaknesses, but I can see that I am much less reactive than I used to be. I am much more calm than I used to be. And Buddhism just helps me to be more aware of when I'm causing myself to suffer. And awareness is that really big, important first step in being able to transform your mind and calm your mind. And I feel much more content when I'm practicing my Buddhist tools. So very, very useful for me. And I hope that it may be for you as well. In 2008, I formally became a Buddhist, which just means practicing the Buddha's tools, practicing working with my own mind. It doesn't mean becoming a Buddha, which a lot of people seem to think. course, whenever I get angry or I slip up, people say, well, you're not very Buddhist, are you? But being a Buddhist doesn't mean you have to be perfect. It just means that you're striving to work with your mind. And that's what I try to do. So I went to a refuge ceremony, or I took part in a refuge ceremony out at the Vajrayana Institute. And this is just a ceremony where you take vows, your commitment to practicing the Buddhist tools, to working on your mind, and you can take, there's 5 lay vows that people can take: not to lie, not to steal, not to commit sexual misconduct, not to kill, and not to take mind-altering substances. So there's different levels. You can just take any number between 1 and 5 of those vows, or otherwise you take them at a very basic level. So Geshe Sampton, who is the main senior monastic resident teacher at VI, officiated at that refuge ceremony. And Geshe is a title which means one who knows virtue, one who knows what should be practiced and what should be eliminated or abandoned. Geshe Sampton is a very wise, very compassionate man and a very skillful teacher. So I encourage you to check out any of Geshe Sampton's teachings, which I think they're all on YouTube. Some of them he does on Zoom, I think, but check out the calendar if you want to explore at an advanced level in Buddhism. Geshe Sampton became a monk at 9 years old, and he did his Geshe degree, which is a 23-year course at university in India, Sera Monastery. So it's the Geshe degree is equivalent to having a PhD in Buddhist philosophy. Very comprehensive course. I also facilitate a meditation group in the Sutherland Shire. I've been doing that for about 9 years now, and that's been really beneficial for me as well, particularly meeting so many like-minded people in my community who I wouldn't have had the chance to connect with apart from this group. So it's really helps you practice if you have people around you in contact with you who have that same interest in working on their own mind rather than blaming everyone else for what's going wrong in their view. It's really helpful to be around like-minded people. And that's what's so wonderful about going to VI when hopefully it will be open again for classes in the not too distant future. And I would really encourage all of you to attend the actual centre. And I've been missing attending the centre, even though we're very, very fortunate to have all the teachings live streamed, which is just amazing. We have such good karma to have such a wealth of teachings of, some of the best teachers in the world are currently on YouTube from all different Buddhist centres and other religions, and in any sort of modality. There's so much being live streamed because we're isolating, doing the right thing. So we have to be very, very grateful for that as well. Yay, says Crystal. Yeah, It'll be good. I'm really missing hugs as well. So the Vajrayana Institute, just a little bit about that. We call it VI for short. It's Vajrayana Institute is a bit of a mouthful. The VI is a centre for the study and the development of the mind in accordance with the wisdom of Tibetan Buddhism and the philosophy of the Dalai Lama. The VI is affiliated with FPMT, which stands for the Federation of the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition. And this is a group of over 150 Buddhist centres worldwide. And the FPMT was established in the 70s by Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Lama Yeshe escaped from Tibet in 1959, I think it was, when the Chinese invaded Tibet, as did many other Tibetans. They escaped. The Dalai Lama fled Tibet as well, and Lama Yeshe was in a refugee camp in India where he met Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who became his main disciple, and they took a real interest in teaching Western hippies who to India and sought out Tibetan teachers there or Buddhist teachers. Lama Yeshe had a passion for teaching Westerners, and eventually these Westerners brought Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe back to the West, and they ended up starting the FPMT, and that flourished and became over 150 centres worldwide now. So again, we are very, very fortunate. We have very good karma to have all these amazing Buddhist teachers coming to the West. And as His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Lama Yeshe say, we really have the Chinese invading Tibet to thank for them coming to the West. So that's a positive way of looking at the invasion of Tibet. So, as I said, I really feel that Buddhism, my practice of Buddhism, has helped me in many, many different ways. My life is more meaningful now. I feel more content now. My life has more purpose. And my purpose in life is to work on my mind, just striving to become the best version of myself that I can be. It makes my life really valuable to me to think that I'm trying to better myself, to better my mind, to become more compassionate, more wise. So, what is Buddhism? His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, "My religion is kindness," which I think is a lovely way to sum up the Buddhist religion. It makes it nice and simple and clear, and that's your goal, is just to be as kind as you can be all the time. My religion is kindness. It's particularly inspiring for me. It's in a nutshell, it's telling us that we're just striving to be as kind as we can be. Keep it simple. There are no dogmas in Buddhism. There's no theistic God in Buddhism, no creator God. Buddha tells us that we should question everything that he teaches, everything that any teacher teaches us, we should question. We shouldn't just accept things on blind faith out of respect for that teacher. So it's all about us taking the teachings and making them our own. We question, we decide if it rings true for us. Does it fit with our experience? Is it logical? And we use all these tools and methods to help us to work on our own mind. So it's not about preaching to others, it's about us working on ourselves, and we can help others by being kind and compassionate and setting a good example rather than preaching and telling them what they should do. In Buddhism, we are not meant to teach unless requested to teach, which I think is a really important thing as well to me. Buddhism is a personal affair. No one tells you what you must do. We work on ourselves in a way that works best for us, where we are right now. So we're improving ourselves to have a more meaningful, happier life in the way that we choose. I think that's, in a nutshell, what it's about. There's said to be 84,000 teachings of the Buddha because different methods work for different types of people. Different teachings and lessons suit different people. So you find what resonates for you, what's the most effective for helping you. My favourite saying of Lama Yeshe's, which I always quote, and I won't apologise for it. Lama Yeshe says, the Buddhist supermarket is very large. You don't have to buy everything in the Buddhist supermarket. If you pick something up off the shelf and you like the look of it, then you can take it home, try it out, use it. If it works, great. And if it doesn't work for you, you just put it aside for now. And that really attracted me to Buddhism as well. You don't have to take the whole package. You don't have to take everything in the supermarket. And often, well, particularly in my experience, I've found that I've taken some of the Buddha's tools and worked with them and found that they really help me. And then at a later stage, I've been able to take more things from the supermarket, which helps me because my knowledge base and my experience has changed and grown, and I find that different tools now help me to what did before. So with 84,000 teachings, I think we're going to find something that'll help us, or lots of things that will help us, I hope. Have you found that, Crystal? That you may go back to the supermarket and pick up different tools after a while of working with the ones that you originally bought? Definitely. Very good. The Dalai Lama also says the very purpose of life is to be happy. We just tend to go about it in the wrong way, thinking that happiness is something out there. Buddhism teaches that happiness is within. It's within our mind. And Buddhism gives us the methods, the practical tools to practice to access the happiness that is within our mind. It's mind training. We're working with our own mind, training our own mind. And the more you practice, the better you become, or the more effective the tools and the teachings are for helping us to be happier. So, this course, Buddhism in a Nutshell, is an introductory overview of Tibetan Buddhist philosophy and practice. And as I said, it was designed by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who is the spiritual director of FPMT. Lama Zopa Rinpoche is seen by many people as an enlightened or a highly realized being. He's quite an incredible being. He is always, in my view, working for others. He's working, putting effort into helping every being. Just as an example, many students write to Lama Zopa Rinpoche requesting advice with their problems. And Lama Zopa's attendant has said that at any time there would be at least 2,000 letters waiting for Lama Zopa to read an answer. And the attendant reports that Lama Zopa answers every single letter himself. Some of the answers that he gives are 45 pages long, the attendant has said. Some of those answers take up to 6 weeks for Lama Zopa to write, because they're so involved. He puts so much effort into answering this one particular student's problem. And just amazing. I've been on a few retreats with Lama Zopa Rinpoche teaching, and just to watch him is an incredible teaching in itself. He's an extremely inspiring being to me and to many other Buddhists. So I hope that you may get some benefit from this introductory overview. And if you wish to explore further into Buddhism, there is a really rich schedule of teachings at the VI, and wonderful teachers, very skillful, experienced, wise teachers at the VI. So I encourage you to explore the website and check out any of those teachings, which, as I said, they're all being live streamed on YouTube. That's a mouthful. So we can it's like shopping online at the supermarket, isn't it? You just go to your computer now, and at any time of the night or day that suits you, and you can check out any of those teachers or teachings and pick up what you like from the online supermarket of Buddhism. Very fortunate. So Shakyamuni Buddha, who is the Buddha on top of my head here, was the historical Buddha of our time in this world. This Buddha, any Buddha, doesn't start out as a Buddha. Shakyamuni Buddha was born a person just like us. He was born Prince Siddhartha Gautama in about 550 BC in a tiny village in Nepal called Lumbini. And his life, Prince Siddhartha's life, exemplifies his search for answers to the big meaning of life type questions that many of us have. Questions like, who am I? Why do we suffer? What happens when I die? How can I be happy? How can I make life meaningful? So when the prince was born, a prophet predicted that he would grow up to be either a great king, a ruler, or he would grow up to be a great spiritual leader. And the king, quite understandably, preferred that the baby would grow up to be a great king, to take over the ruling of the kingdom. So the king decided that he would bring up the baby, Siddhartha, in absolute luxury within the walls of the palace and not allow the prince to venture outside the palace walls. The king made sure that there was no suffering in the palace around Prince Siddhartha. So there was no sickness, no people in pain, no dying. Everything was positive. There was every luxury that the prince could have was given to him. And the king thought that by keeping all suffering hidden from the prince and giving him every sensual pleasure, every luxury that he could, that the prince would then be happy to stay in the palace and he would devote his life to being a great king rather than going out seeking spiritual meaning in life. But in the when the prince was in his 20s, he found that he wanted more. He wasn't satisfied with all the material possessions and all the sense pleasures that he had. So one night he snuck out of the palace and went into the small local village. And when he was there, he encountered the sufferings of life. In that one night, he encountered sickness, old age, and death in the streets of this village. And realizing that these sufferings are experienced by every being, Siddhartha aspired to find a way to end the suffering of all beings, as well as himself. So on that night, he met a monk who looked serene and happy, and this inspired Siddhartha to renounce his princely life and to devote his life to meditating and following the spiritual path, getting spiritual teachings to find truth and happiness and freedom from suffering. He resolved to leave the palace in search of his answers to the problems of suffering. And after bidding his wife and child farewell without waking them, he rode into the forest, cut his long hair with his sword, and exchanged his fine royal clothes for the simple robes of a monk, of an ascetic. He then devoted the next 6 years of his life to meditation, yoga, and the pursuit of spiritual training and education. Along with 5 companions who he met on this path, he sought out many different teachers, spiritual teachers, but he found that they didn't have the answers to the questions that he was looking for. He practiced austerity through bodily deprivation, which nearly cost him his life. He was only eating 1 grain of rice a day, and sometimes you can see statues of Shakyamuni Buddha where he is very emaciated. Is that the word, emaciated? Is that the right way? He looks like a skeleton with skin on the skeleton. He was very close to death from starvation. And at that stage, a woman called Sujata came along and offered the Buddha, or offered Siddhartha Gautama, rice pudding out of compassion. And this caused Prince Siddhartha to reconsider the practice of starvation and pain. He realised that the way to perfecting his mind, to becoming enlightened, was not through the extreme of relying on sensual pleasure, as he had done at the palace, nor was it the extreme of austerity, denying himself any sensual pleasure. He realised that the way to perfecting the mind, to becoming awakened, was through the middle way. And this is the Madhyamika philosophy of Buddhism, which is a system of thought free from all extremes. So there's no extreme thinking in Buddhism. It's the middle way. So when Prince Siddhartha took that food, the rice porridge, his 5 companions wouldn't talk to him anymore. They thought that he had done the wrong thing, and they thought that, he'd given in by abandoning his asceticism. Then Buddha, he wasn't a Buddha yet, he was still Prince Siddhartha or Siddhartha. He sat under a Bodhi tree, vowing to stay there in meditation until he found the ultimate truth and he attained his goal of enlightenment or awakening or perfecting his mind, all the same thing. So in this meditation, all the maras or mind delusions arose in his mind to distract him from his goal. All these maras or mind delusions challenged him. And the final mara that arose was one which it was his thoughts saying, what gives you the right to believe that you can attain omniscience, that you can have a perfect mind? And vision arose. Siddhartha touched the earth with his right hand, and you can see in the tanka above me, he's touching his hand to the earth. And he said, "The earth is my witness of all the rebirths that I have had, all the effort that I have made to ending suffering, and of my wish to benefit every other being." And with that, all the maras were dispelled, all his delusions were eliminated, and he was awakened. He had the answer to the cause of suffering and how to eliminate it. So at this point, he became known as Shakyamuni Buddha. Shakya is his clan name. Muni means able one, and Buddha means enlightened or awakened one. So this enlightened state of mind, as I said, it's just a perfect mind. All the negative, harmful qualities of mind have been eliminated: anger, hatred, greed, ignorance, all eliminated, and all the positive qualities of mind, the beneficial qualities like compassion, love, generosity, wisdom, all those qualities are perfected. And someone who attains enlightenment is called a Buddha. And there isn't only one, there are many, many Buddhas, past, present, and future. And we all have this potential to gain enlightenment and become Buddhas ourselves. This is called our Buddha nature, this potential to perfect our mind. So after Shakyamuni Buddha became enlightened, for 7 weeks he enjoyed the freedom and tranquility of liberation. At this point, he had no inclination to speak about his realization or teach others. He felt that it would be too difficult for most people to understand. But then, according to legend, Brahma, the chief of the 3,000 worlds, requested that Shakyamuni Buddha teach, since there were those whose eyes were only a little clouded over. So Brahma said that there were people who would be able to understand the Buddhist teachings. And that was very, very fortunate for all of us, because the Buddha agreed to teach at that stage. He then sought out his 5 former companions. He thought that they would be his first students. When these companions saw the Buddha approaching in Deer Park in Benares, India, they decided to ignore him, since he'd broken his vows. And yet, as the Buddha walked towards them, they found something so radiant about his presence that they rose, prepared a seat, bathed his feet, and sat down to listen to the Buddha's first teaching, or the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, as it's known. The Buddha then spent 45 years travelling, practicing, and teaching, and he passed away in India at the age of 80. When he died, it is said that he told his disciples that they should follow no leader, but be your own light. So this Buddha was searching for answers to those big questions of life, he found them and he taught others how to also perfect their mind and become awakened. And then those students taught their students who taught their students, and the Buddhist teachings has come down the lineage of Buddhist teachers and masters to us in this very day. So something else to be extremely grateful for if you decide to check out some of these Buddhist tools and you find that they help you. So I think this story of Shakyamuni Buddha's life has many similarities between our modern day Western life. You know, this was 2,500 years ago that the Buddha was around. But I still think there's a lot that we can learn from that story. A lot of similarities in the problems that arise in our life. Today, in the Western world, in Australia, there's other countries as well, there's much affluence and we value material wealth a great deal, I think, to the expense of our spiritual life. We just get too distracted by all these material things and sense pleasures, and we don't have the time to devote to our spiritual education or our spiritual yearnings to learn more. We get too busy, caught up in the busy modern world. So this is like what the Buddha experienced when he was living inside the palace walls. He had every material luxury and wealth that he could want. And he found, though, that that just didn't satisfy him. He needed more. And I think those of us who do decide that we're not satisfied with all the material things in our life and are able to have the opportunity to look into our spiritual education and practice, I think we are very, very fortunate to be able to do that. Many people just don't have the opportunity, you know, particularly people who are in third world countries or who are very poor and have to just spend so much of their life just surviving, just getting the basics of life. They don't have the time or the opportunity to develop their spiritual side. People who are severely disabled or sick have great difficulties being able to develop their spiritual side. So those of us who have the opportunity to learn and develop our own minds have a very, very precious opportunity. So every person, every being, every sentient being, which means a being who has a mind, every one of us wants happiness. That's really the goal. And yet few seem to actually find it. Just about everything that we do in our life is an attempt to find real happiness. And this is something that is really good to reflect upon, to really discover for yourself if that's what it's all about. Are we really just constantly trying to find happiness or not? You have to look into that for yourself. Question. We want happiness, we want to avoid suffering. And in our search for happiness, we, in the modern world, go from one relationship to another. We go from one job to another, one country to another. We get university degrees. We train to be great sports people. We have babies. We race cars, ride motorbikes, write books, grow flowers, grow veggies, spend money on big homes and fast cars, boats, computers, iPhones, holidays. We do all sorts of things looking for happiness. It's all about getting happiness. We eat raw foods, organic foods. We practice yoga. We meditate. Everything that we do is really in that wish to be happy. That's what we're trying to satisfy. Maybe you'll have to reflect upon that to decide for yourself if that is true. There's nothing wrong with wanting happiness. We're not saying that at all. There's nothing wrong with all of our attempts to find happiness. The problem is that we see these things like relationships and possessions and adventures as having an inherent ability to satisfy us, as being the cause of our lasting happiness. But this can't be, simply because these things don't last forever. They're impermanent. Everything by nature is constantly changing. Eventually it disappears. Our body, our friends, loved ones, all our belongings are all impermanent. They won't be around forever. We know that intellectually, but we don't act as if we know that. We get so upset when we lose our favourite things, particularly our loved ones, the people in our life. But this is impermanence. So our dependence on impermanent things and our clinging to the happiness that they bring is what causes us disappointment rather than satisfaction and contentment. We do experience some happiness with things outside of ourselves, but it doesn't truly satisfy us. It doesn't free us from all of our suffering, our problems. It's not lasting, long-lasting happiness. The pleasure / happiness that we get from these things external to ourselves are poor quality happiness. They're unreliable and they're short-lived. But this doesn't mean that we should give up our friends and our possessions. Rather, we should give up the misconceptions that we have about them, the unrealistic expectation of what these things and these people can do for us. Not only do we see them as permanent and able to satisfy us. The root of our problems is our mistaken view of reality. We believed instinctively that people and things exist in and of themselves from their own side, that they have inherent nature. We see these things as having certain qualities abiding within them, that they are from their own side good or bad, attractive or unattractive. These qualities seem to be out there in the objects or the people themselves, independent of our viewpoint and everything else. This isn't the way that they actually exist. We may think, for example, that chocolate is inherently delicious. It brings us satisfaction. But if it was, it would never fail to give us pleasure. And everyone would experience the chocolate the same. We know that's not true. If we eat too much chocolate, we will feel sick, get a bellyache. So happiness is not inherent in the chocolate. Some people are allergic to chocolate and it will give them migraines or make them feel very ill. So happiness is not an inherent quality of the chocolate. Another example is when you fall in love with someone. You think this person is divine, everything that you ever wanted in someone. Other people may look at this person and wonder what you could possibly see in him or her. And eventually, after some time, you start to see that there are actually flaws in this person. Maybe the very qualities that you found so endearing to start with start to actually get on your nerves. These people start to let down their guard with you, and then they may burp, fart, snore, eat too loud, laugh wrong, all sorts of little idiosyncrasies that are not making you happy anymore. They're actually causing you to suffer. So, what you were clinging to as your source of lifelong happiness or permanent happiness turned out to not be that way. It's because those qualities are not inherent in that person and they are dependent upon our view and what we label as good or bad, attractive, unattractive. So it's not that happiness is inherent in that person or those things. It's all interdependent upon us, upon conditions, upon the parts that make them up, upon what we label as good or bad. These mistaken ideas that we have, our delusions, the Buddha called them, are deeply ingrained and habitual. And it colours all our relationships and dealings with the world. Our picture of reality is exaggerated. The good or the bad qualities that we see in things are actually created and projected by our own mind. So, according to Buddha, there is lasting, stable happiness, which everyone has the potential to experience. And the cause of this happiness lies within our own mind. It's not out there, it's within our own mind. Long term, lasting, innate happiness. And the methods for achieving this happiness that is within us can be practiced by anyone. We can learn to be happy at any time, even in situations that we would now see as difficult or extremely painful. We can actually always access that happiness within our mind if we perfect our mind. Lama Zopa says we can learn to love problems like ice cream. I mentioned before that I'm only just starting to understand that that could actually be true. And we learn to love problems like ice cream by transforming the way that we perceive things, the way that we perceive our problems and our challenges in life. So eventually, by realizing the way things actually exist as interdependent, we can eliminate the source of all disturbing states of mind and reach our goal of enlightenment, perfecting our mind. Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, started out just like us as an ordinary being, deluded and suffering. Through his own effort, he attained enlightenment. He perfected his mind. And then he taught the way for others to follow. The Buddha can't save us. He would if he could, but he can't. We have to do it for ourselves. But we can perfect our mind and have a meaningful, contented life by following the Buddha's teachings and advice. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. The Buddha has given us all these tools and teachings from his own experience of perfecting his mind. And this allows us to practice on our own mind, to transform our own mind, and to follow our own path to awakening or enlightenment. So, are there any questions? No questions. We're all very clear and we're on the way to enlightenment. That's good. Well done. So, the Buddha's first teaching at Deer Park was the Four Noble Truths. Looking at the time, I've only got 15 minutes to just very briefly give you an overview of the Four Noble Truths, and then we will go into more detail of this first teaching of the Buddha next week. So the Four Noble Truths are a summary of the answers to Buddha's meaning of life questions. The Four Noble Truths are the basis of all Buddhist teachings in every school and tradition of Buddhism. So just listing these Four Noble Truths to start, and then I will just give a very brief description of each of them and then go into more detail next week. First Noble Truth is the truth of suffering. The second Noble Truth is the truth of the cause of suffering. The third noble truth is the truth of cessation of suffering. And then the fourth noble truth is the truth of the path to the cessation of suffering. I just need to look at my notes. Yeah, the path that leads to the cessation of suffering, or true happiness, that could also be known as. I just stumbled over that fourth noble truth because I'm not there yet. I haven't completed that path to the cessation of suffering. So, the first noble truth, the truth of suffering. Sometimes it is said that suffering is not a good translation of what the Buddha taught. The word was dukkha, and many people say that a better translation is dissatisfaction. So, the truth of suffering or the truth of dissatisfaction. Every unenlightened being experiences suffering to some extent. And suffering refers not only to physical and mental pain, but to any unpleasant or unwanted experience. It can include discomfort, emotional problems like disappointment, loneliness, depression, stress, fear, and just slight, subtle dissatisfaction. Some people say that Buddhism is pessimistic as it speaks so much about suffering. But the Buddha is merely pointing out what's true, that no one is able to get through life without difficulties, without some suffering. And like any problem, if you don't know that there's a problem, you won't fix it. So, the point of meditating and gaining awareness of these sufferings that we have is not to become depressed, but to generate the wish to be free of suffering. So, there's a good purpose to reflecting upon our life being suffering, that there's always a level of dissatisfaction until we become enlightened or perfect our mind. And again, this is something that we all have to reflect upon for ourselves. We don't just accept it. And it may take a lot of reflection, meditating, before you're willing to accept that, yes, this is actually true, that there is dissatisfaction, some sort of dissatisfaction, always under the surface in our life until we perfect our mind. And we'll go into this more detail next week as well. So, the second noble truth, the truth of the cause of suffering. Buddha discovered that the source of problems and suffering lies within our own mind. So, our suffering is not out there, it's within our own mind. There are two main causes of our suffering, which are our mental afflictions or delusions and karma. Karma is the actions that we do arising from those mental afflictions that we have. So these delusions are disturbing negative factors within our minds. They disturb our peace of mind. And delusions cover both afflictive emotions like pride and anger, jealousy, greed, and their cause, which is ignorance. The three main poisons of our delusions are ignorance, anger, and attachment. They're the main cause of our suffering. And all the other negative emotions that we have are actually a mix of those three main poisons: the ignorance, attachment, and anger. So I just saw a question there. Mimi, would you punish a person for not able to understand colours even though you teach him or her about colours every day? I'm not sure I understand the question, Mimi. I asked Muslim, but no answer. Let me just read again. Will you punish a person for not being able to understand colours, even though you teach him or her about colours every day? So, is that question to me as a being who is not a perfect being? Or are you asking what a Buddha would do? If you're asking me, if I did punish a person for not understanding, then that would be out of my delusion that I do that. Why all merciful, invisible Allah punishes humans forever in hell for not believing on a book, Quran, written by man? I know next to nothing about Islamic religion. I don't even know if that's the correct term. That's how little I know about it. So I'm not the right person to ask about that. In Buddhism, not you, but I ask this to Muslims. In Buddhism, there is no God that is handing out punishment or reward. It's all about us punishing and rewarding ourselves, is what it comes down to. So there's no creator God who is punishing, rewarding in Buddhism. I know when my children were young, they went to a Christian, what's the word when you go to youth groups at a Christian church, and they were told by the teachers there that they would go to hell because they didn't believe in God. And I wasn't Buddhist at that time, but when my kids came home and told me that, I was quite disappointed in a church, a Christian church, telling young children they're going to go to hell forever because they don't believe in God. I thought that was not very acceptable, and a pretty sort of horrific thing to tell young kids. And if that's the way a religion works, then that's not the religion for me. So we're all different. We need different types of teachings to inspire us and to help us to be the best person that we can be. And there is a reason for having different religions because, as I said before, different strokes for different folks. You know, we relate to different types of teachings. And that's what attracts me to Buddhism, that it's not about being punished or rewarded by an external source. That's what works with my mind, to think that it's all me rewarding or punishing myself, um, deciding what's right and wrong, having these goals of being wise and kind and compassionate. That's what inspires me and helps me to lead what I think is a meaningful life and a happy life for myself. Thank you for clarification about Buddhism. You missed blind up there. Well, I'm glad that I helped clarify. Um, yeah, I think it's just about working with ourselves, with our own mind. And I really like that Buddhism doesn't have those dogmas saying that this is the way it has to be and this is the way it has to be for everyone. And it works for me to think that I'm working on my own mind and I'm trying to be the kindest person I can be. Dalai Lama says his religion is kindness. That works for me. So we've got 4 minutes left, and I will just quickly tell you what the third and fourth noble truth are. The third noble truth is the truth of cessation of suffering. This is the good news, that it is actually possible to become free of suffering. The causes of suffering are in our own mind, and the solution is within our own mind as well. It's possible to eliminate all the causes of our suffering, making our mind free of all delusion and negativities. So if we do that, if we get rid of all the negativities in our mind and we develop the positive qualities to the utmost, then the mind is always in a state of peace and happiness. You no longer experience any suffering, such as sickness, pain, aging, death, fear, etc. And this state of mind is known as nirvana or liberation. In Buddhism, they say that the mind is by nature clear and knowing. All emotions, including delusions and afflictive emotions, are fleeting, adventitious. They're not the nature of mind. So we can get rid of them. We get rid of all those negative qualities and we're left with a pristine, clear mind. And I've got 2 minutes left, so very, very quickly, the last noble truth, the truth of the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. Or, in other words, the truth of the path that leads to true happiness. This is what we need to do to free the mind from delusions and karma, the causes of our suffering. The Buddha taught many different methods to gradually decrease and eventually eliminate all those causes of suffering in our mind and to cultivate the causes of happiness, peace, and liberation. And this path can be presented in different ways. One of the ways of presenting this path is the three principal aspects of the path to enlightenment, which are renunciation, bodhicitta, and the wisdom of emptiness. And I probably shouldn't have mentioned that because we've only got 1 minute to go, but we will talk more about it next week. Just a definition, a very quick definition of those words, those aspects of the path. Renunciation is the determination to be free from suffering and making a conscious effort to avoid the causes of suffering. Bodhicitta is developing an altruistic intention of freeing all sentient beings from their suffering. And then the wisdom of emptiness is realizing the true nature of phenomena, that things don't exist the way they appear as solid and unchanging. Rather, they are interdependent on causes, conditions, and the way we perceive them. So, more next week. And during the week, just reflect upon some of those things. Just think about whether you think it could be possible to have perfect happiness in our mind by eliminating all our negative qualities of mind. Does that make sense? Do you think it's possible? Is it logical? If we eliminate the negative qualities of mind, does that mean that we'll stop acting in a negative way, which is karma? So if we can eliminate all the negative qualities of mind, and then that stops us acting in a negative way, then eventually is that going to lead, or could it lead to perfect happiness, to perfecting our mind? Something to think about. Sue, who is my very old dear friend, is saying, no, she's not very old, that's not what I meant. My long-term good friend says I'm rushing through the path. I certainly am rushing through the path. And I'm sorry, but we will expand more about it on next week. If we examine where our negativity comes from, we can then understand our suffering better. There's something else to reflect upon from Sue. Examine where our negativity comes from. Okay, and then we can understand our suffering better. Yeah, as I said, there's so many different tools that we can use. It's very rich in different methods, practical tools that we can use, and we find what helps us. So thank you all for putting in some effort tonight to learning a bit more about what could possibly help us to be a more kind, wise person, compassionate person. And I hope that I haven't confused people too much. And I think what His Holiness says, my religion is kindness, I think that could help anyone to just keep in mind that kindness is our goal. So I hope that we all are as kind as we can be this week, and maybe we can see if that helps us to be happier, if we really challenge ourselves to being more kind than what we are now. But thank you very, very much. Hope you are all well. I am well and I am grateful, and I hope you are all well as well. Thank you. Bye.